Well, happy holidays and thanks for joining us on this edition of Sports Business Radio, our last of 2022. And at the end of the year, if you've listened to us since 2004, you know that we do our top 10 sports business stories of the year. We look back at the year that was. I'm joined by executive producer Bryan Griggs. Griggs, how are you?
I'm doing good. And every time we get to this moment, it's always like, wow, that was a year already. It just flies by as it always does. But always a fun show to dig into our top 10. And every year there's always some big sports stories. So I'm looking forward to the show.
Yeah, and we've had some great guests this year as well. So I would invite our listeners to go back into the Sports Business Radio podcast archives and just some amazing guests. We kicked off the year with Monica Aldama from the Netflix show Cheer, one of the best coaches in the country in any sport. Molly Bloom was with us. We just got back from doing some shows in St. Petersburg with the Tampa Bay Lightning, in San Francisco with the Golden State Warriors. It was so good, Griggs, to be out on the road last week. I mean, we hadn't done a road show in almost 3 years. So it felt good. We've got a bunch of road shows coming up in 2023. So we'll be out on the road again. And it's always fun to be in front of a studio audience and to see people in person, including our guests.
Yeah, it was nice to be in person with people, and you and I dominate the cities we always go to by walking and fooding and drinking some good drinks and seeing some great locations. So it's always fun, especially at Christmas time. It was fun to see San Francisco with the tree and go on the cable car and do all that stuff. So it was fun.
Yeah, your first trip to San Francisco. So you got to go on the cable car, not trolley.
Yeah.
And we had some great Chinese food in
Yeah.
Chinatown. Oh my God, so good. We did not go ice skating. That
Nope.
was a little bit of an upset. Usually we do ice skating during our December roadshow time. But, I got to say, San Francisco ice skating, just not the same as New York City at Central Park or Rock Center.
Yeah, we walked by the rink a couple times and it was just like a little underwhelming. And I was like, you know what? Let's keep it at the fancy ones, the big ones, the good ones, and we'll just skip San Fran this time.
Yeah. So again, if you're listening, you can watch this on our Sports Business Radio YouTube channel, which you can find the link at sportsbusinessradio.com, or obviously listen on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Spread the word. Like I said, we've been around since 2004. We've got a truckload of archives that you can go back and listen to. Let's get to it, Griggs. Let's start with our 10th biggest story of the year 2022. This according to our crack staff at Sports Business Radio. The passing of a few icons, and sometimes the word icon gets thrown around lightly. These two are giants. Literally, one of them was a giant. Bill Russell, 11-time NBA champion, the first Black NBA head coach, a social justice giant. He is on the MVP trophy for the NBA Finals. He died on July 31st. And, he had a great life, such an impact on so many people. One of the most distinguishable laughs that you would ever hear in your life. He helped lay the blueprint for many players, including the late Kobe Bryant. But when you talk about winners in sports, not too many people have won more than 11 championships and, left the legacy that he left the Boston Celtics, great Bill Russell.
Yeah, 11 champs in 13 years. I mean, just think about that. Like most guys play and don't maybe even get to the finals. That's like a wish list item. 11 champs in 13 seasons. It's crazy.
Yeah.
He's a 12-time All-Star, 5-time MVP. One little tidbit I looked up, he was actually cut from his junior high team and almost from his high school team. I love those stories where they're the underdog and then look at what he turned into be. So that's just pretty cool.
Yeah. And endured a lot of tough times and hatred for being a Black athlete back in the day. Had people break into his house and write terrible things on the wall in his home. And, was, like I said, a social justice warrior. So he was so much more than just a great athlete. He was a great humanitarian, and, his impact will be felt for many, many years to come. But if you're looking at the history of the NBA, he's on the Mount Rushmore of people who had the greatest impact on the league, without a doubt. I think it's great that everyone's been wearing the number 6 patch on their jerseys. The Celtics have it on their court. So we lost Bill Russell this year. Then we lost another giant. And, I think some people who've listened to this show know I went to school in Los Angeles. I went to Loyola Marymount. I had the pleasure of listening to Vin Scully while I lived in Los Angeles. And Vin Scully left us on August 2nd. So here in the span of just a few days, we lost Bill Russell and then we lost Vin Scully. But Vin Scully, was the soundtrack of so many great sporting events of my lifetime. He was on network TV, he called golf, he called NFL football, he called baseball, but he's probably best known for being the voice of the Los Angeles Dodgers and, really being the, person who documented everything that happened to that franchise for decades. And as players come and go, he was the constant that remained with the Dodgers. And, if you remember, Bob Costas joined us, I think it was last year. The time is all distorted now to me, but and he talked about how Vin Scully called such a great game, was so vivid with his description, that Ray Charles asked Bob Costas to introduce him to Vin Scully. And I guess that's probably the highest compliment you can have, is when someone who can't see feels like they could have someone paint a picture of what baseball would look like if they could see. And that's what he thought Vin Scully did. It's about the highest compliment you can have as a play-by-play person. But he was the best. And, we will miss him. But, like with Bill Russell, the impact that Vin Scully has left will be felt for many, many years to come.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a radio guy. I always have loved it. And I live in the Portland area, so we didn't get Dodgers games all the time. But then when streaming started taking on, I could, catch some. And I mean, he's just masterful. It was 9 innings of storytelling, and just the way he painted the picture, like you just mentioned, especially for baseball. I think he was just perfect for baseball because he had that kind of a relaxed, slow, just calming, presence about his voice. I love listening to him. I mean, 67 seasons calling those games. That is just incredible. He's got an Emmy, a couple of Hall of Fames in there, Radio Hall of Fame. The list goes on forever. But yeah, he is just the master of his craft and will be missed for sure.
Yeah. I mean, 67 years
Crazy.
doing anything is remarkable.
Right.
But doing what he did and being at the top of his craft for many of those 67 years, gosh, we'll miss him. Like you said, as radio broadcasters, he's what we all strive to be. Was a good human being as well, just like Bill Russell. So, those are 2 icons that will be missed. I would be remiss if we didn't mention one other person that we lost recently, literally in the last week, and that's Mississippi State head football coach Mike Leach. All the stories are flooding out since his death about all the kind things that he did. I just read a story today on Sports Illustrated about a Black single mother who lived in Mississippi, who owned a restaurant. And, Mike Leach loved the food in there, found out that they were, suffering tough times during the pandemic, and he wrote a check to save her restaurant. He impacted so many of his players, so many different coaches, was just the straightest shooter you can have. If you Google some of his videos, I think my favorite one is his thoughts on marriage. When someone at a press conference told him that they were going to be getting married soon, he went on to this 5-minute, dialogue about what between now and the wedding was going to look like with the planning. He was an outside the box thinker with the air raid offense that he ran, laid the blueprint for other coaches that followed after him, only 61 years old. So, whereas Bill Russell and Vin Scully were older and, had more full lives, Mike Leach, I feel like, was taken from us far too soon and very suddenly. So, I'd be remiss if we didn't mention him in the losses this year.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite interviews I heard about him was his love of pirates. He just would go off on pirates, and it would just go forever. And I love when somebody would interview him, you'd ask one question about the game or whatever, and then basically the rest of the interview was about something other than the game, which was just awesome. And again, a great storyteller. all over the place, but so funny. His interviews are just iconic. I've already been, since he passed, I've been pulling them up on YouTube and just watching them over and over because they're so funny.
I mean, hit me up at SB Radio with your thoughts on Twitter. But I was thinking after he died, he's got to be in the conversation for the greatest press conference person of all time. You know, we talk about Bill Belichick and Greg Popovich really giving us nothing during press conferences and stonewalling the media. When you're looking at the people who consistently, not just one or two times, but consistently entertained us at press conferences after games, Mike Leach has to be at least in the top 3 for most entertaining press conferences consistently of all time. So again, like I said, listeners, hit me up on Twitter at SB Radio if you have other people on that list. But I mean, Griggs, don't you agree?
100%. I mean, and he was not one of those guys that would Marshawn Lynch it and come to say no comment. He was in
Right.
there and he'd be in there for 15, 20 minutes talking. I mean, he's the last guy to leave. And I love that too, because he respected what all the media was doing. He respected the teams and everything involved. But I agree. It's got to be top 3, top 5 for sure.
Yeah. All right. Our 9th biggest story of the year, 2022. This is kind of a combo, but 2 very prominent athletes saw their careers go downward, maybe not money wise, but certainly reputation wise. Let's start with Kyrie Irving. We talked about that at length on the show this year. I won't go back into it, but, he liked an anti-Semitic video on Twitter, on social media. There's all kinds of things going on with him this past year. And again, I'm not going to redocument all of it, but he lost his sponsorship with Nike. He was suspended and fined by the Brooklyn Nets and the NBA. He had to go through sensitivity training. I think we look at Kyrie Irving pretty differently now than maybe we did 2 years ago. And he's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. And you have to wonder, like, who wants this guy on their team? And he's certainly not going to get the money that he would have had he just played basketball and kept his nose out of controversy. So, that's one big athlete who fell. And then the other one, Griggs, is Phil Mickelson. So Mickelson in February was dropped by Workday, Callaway, KPMG, Heineken. They all dropped him in February. But he didn't really care because he was too busy signing a $200 million contract with the Live Golf Tour weeks later as they launched, and we'll get to that later in the show. But when you lose all your sponsors, when you lose your reputation, when people look at you differently, when they boo you wherever you go, it's tough. And these were 2 very prominent, successful, and I would say well-liked athletes before this year.
Yeah, and I think Kyrie a little bit might be more than Phil, but I feel like Kyrie's controversy followed him around a little bit more. He always had something going on off the court that wasn't quite, in tune with what maybe the team wanted. So I think that kind of was not terribly surprising when he did the last, F up that he just did. But I think Phil was more well liked, I would say, for around the world. But I mean, man, what a February for Phil. Loses all those sponsorships. But of course, like you said, you're signing 200 and whatever million with a Live, so it didn't really matter to him. But I miss seeing Phil around. I thought he was such a fun player to watch play, and you just always, he was never out of the hunt in a tournament, especially a major. He could always show up and play. So we'll see what we see on the Live Tour with him. But yeah, those are 2 big names that had some rough 2022s.
So I'll be interesting to see who signs Kyrie in 2023 and for how much. And I would guess it's going to be on a short-term deal, like a 1, maybe 2-year deal. Yeah. And then with Phil, like, he's kind of embraced being the black hat and the villain. He literally wears all black now. He's got his own logo on his hat. He has no logos on his shirt. He's sold his soul to the Live Tour, and he's making $200 million and, lost all of his sponsors. So, we'll see what happens in the future for Kyrie and Phil. Our 8th biggest sports business story of 2022, more controversy, Griggs. We had 2 owners who have been in the news for a long time for what they've been doing, but it all kind of came to a head in 2022. First, Dan Snyder. I mean, there have been congressional hearings. There have been reports that led to the firing of John Gruden because emails got leaked. We've learned that Dan Snyder has done some pretty bad things. I mean, he hired private investigators to tail the former GM of the Washington Commanders, and they did so with drones and with showing up on construction sites. And I mean, you want to talk about crossing the line, and you know what he's done with the cheerleaders and women in the organization. It's all very well documented. But on November 2nd, he announced that he was engaging Bank of America to facilitate a sale for the team. So when you're looking ahead to 2023 and you're looking for some of the biggest sports business stories of the year, the sale of the Washington Commanders is going to be one of those big stories. And, you know, the Denver Broncos are the most recent NFL team to sell. They sold for $4.65 billion. I would expect the Commanders to get more than that. It's going to be closer to $5 billion. So it will set the record for the highest sale in NFL history. And furthermore, the stain that the NFL has on it right now from the ownership of Dan Snyder will be removed from the league. So the NFL and Roger Goodell can't get Dan Snyder out of the league fast enough. I'm sure if they could sell them tomorrow, or specifically before the Super Bowl on February 7th, that would be great. So Roger Goodell doesn't have to stand up at his State of the Union press conference at the Super Bowl and answer questions about Dan Snyder and, you know, these reports and all the things that he's done. The other owner that has faced controversy this year is Robert Sarver, the owner of the Phoenix Suns. He announced that he'd be selling the team on September 21st. And Griggs, as we tape this today, Matt Ashibia is the president and CEO of United Wholesale Mortgage. It's a Michigan-based company. He purchased the Suns for a record $4 billion. He was a walk-on for Michigan State. He was part of the Spartans' 2000 national championship team. He's close with Hall of Fame coach Tom Izzo. He previously made a $32 million donation to the basketball program. But if you recall, go back a few months when the Sarver announcement was made that he was going to start soliciting offers for the team, yours truly said $4 billion would be the sales price. And some people were like, oh, it's only going to be $3 billion or 2.5. No one's going to pay $4 billion. And by the way, the Phoenix Mercury of the WNBA are also included in the sale, and they have good value as well. But it's a $4 billion sales price. So I was right. And it's an NBA record for sales. And again, just like we said, Roger Goodell would be happy to have Dan Snyder out of the league. Adam Silver will be very happy to have Robert Sarver and his controversy out of the league. And this new owner, who becomes the youngest owner, 42 years old, in the league. So also some fresh thinking, most likely, some new energy because he's a young guy. We remember when Mark Cuban came into the league and brought some new energy with him. It's always good to have younger owners come in and bring that energy. And, they're probably going to be around for a while as well. I hope that whoever buys the Commanders, and I hope this new owner of the Suns, were thoroughly vetted by the NFL and the NBA. So we don't find skeletons in their closets like we did with Snyder and with Robert Sarver. And so we don't have a repeat of that poor behavior. You would think both leagues really vetted these owners carefully.
Yeah, you'd hope so because, those are two big franchises, especially the Washington Commanders. I mean, that brand's iconic. I mean, and the stadium and the market's big, and Phoenix is too. But, it's good. Like you said, it's good to get these stains removed that have been in the works. I mean, I think it's been many, many years, especially Dan Snyder, of just, still skeletons in the closet and knowing that this was not looking good. And finally, we're getting around to getting these guys out and getting some new young blood. But it'll be interesting to see. We've talked about it when we talked about the Dan Snyder stuff earlier in the year. Who's going to buy it? And the list is, Jeff Bezos, and it goes on. But that'll be interesting to see and how much they go for too, because you predicted the $4 billion. So we'll see what happens with the Commanders.
Well, one thing I didn't predict, and every article I read, no one had Matt Ashibia,
no,
if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, on anyone's list. So what this shows you is these deals get done in the dark of the night, behind the scenes. They're not played out through the media. And you wake up one day and it's like, oh, the Suns are sold. And here's the person that no one knew about that was buying the team. And they have a basketball background and they know Adam Silver and they know some of the other owners. And now they're in the club. And they paid a record $4 billion. We don't know who the other bidders were. Maybe there were others. I would assume there were. But $4 billion, I mean, again, if you're one of these leagues, you get to say, hey, look, we have a new record sales price. So anything after this, whether it's the Portland Trail Blazers or anything else, you can say this house in the neighborhood just went for $4 billion. It ups the ante for anyone else who wants to buy their way into the league.
Yeah, I think, being in Portland, there's always been rumors of after Paul Allen's passing, if the Blazers are going to be sold. And I've read a couple things today about, hey, this brings the market up. Like you're saying, when your next door neighbor sells for $4 billion, hey, all of a sudden the Blazers are worth, instead of 2.25, it's, hey, we're in 3.75 range, 4 billion range. So I think it does help the sales and the movement of these other teams that are up for sale. But man, that's big money, and it just keeps going up every year.
Our seventh biggest sports business story of the year 2022. Sports media rights continue to soar. So the Big Ten, the NFL on Amazon, MLS and MLB on Apple, these are all things that were announced this year. Griggs, the Big Ten deal, 7 years. We talked about this earlier in the year. The agreement is with Fox, CBS, and NBC. It's going to bring them $7 billion. The deal is going to begin on July 1st. Again, I always joke on this show, this is amateur athletics, $7 billion. And that's not for the NCAA and all of college athletics. That's just for the Big Ten Conference. So, you see Major League Soccer, this was a pretty groundbreaking deal because they're the first league to go exclusively onto streaming. They made the deal with Apple for 10 years. And you and I have talked a lot lately about long-term deals, $2.5 billion. Apple is going to show all MLS regular season and League Cup games on Apple on the streaming platform. So if you were a local broadcaster, and we know some of them, for the Major League Soccer teams on TV, you're out. Like, your job is done. It's network only. There's no local TV broadcasts anymore. You're streaming only, so there's no over-the-air TV. MLS had been with ESPN for over 25 years. And, you look at MLB still has over-the-air deals, but their streaming deal was a big deal. So then you talk about streaming and you go into Amazon. And Amazon is the exclusive sponsor or, carrier of Thursday Night Football, $13 billion deal that runs through 2033. It's basically $1 billion a year. It means Amazon's paying for each game is roughly $67 million to broadcast a game. And by the way, Greg, there have been some stinker Thursday Night Football games. So you're paying $67 million for a stinker. You're not getting the cream of the crop games like Sunday Night Football or even Monday Night Football. You're kind of getting the stinky games, and you're paying $67 million for those games. We're going to see Amazon do the first Black Friday game next year. So, at a certain point, are we going to have a game from the NFL every day of the week?
Yeah.
Sunday, Monday, we've seen Saturday games, Thursday games. Like, when are we going to have Tuesday, Wednesday, and we just said Black Friday. So, like, I guess Tuesday and Wednesday will be the only times that we won't have NFL games. But with the amount of money that's being thrown around for these media rights, the NFL almost can't say no to some of those opportunities.
Well, yeah, and the NFL's king, and it gets the most viewers. And no matter how bad the game is, there's still millions of people tuning in. And I think Amazon's done a good job. I like the video stuff around it and the crew. And I think they've done a good job with it. And of course, it's NFL. They're gonna make these things, pop and make it big and have the production around it. So I think it's going well. And when you were talking about all these numbers in billions, not even that many years ago, everything millions was a lot, right?
Right.
Everything we're talking about has a B in front of it, like the TV rights
Yeah.
deals and the sales of these teams. And I think the NBA TV rights is up 2024-25 season. How's that going to go? I mean, where's that going to end up? That's going to be fun to see too.
Well, and that's why you see a sales price for the Suns of $4 billion. That owner, I guarantee you, is factoring in, we're going to get a lot of money from the media rights deal. So this is going to be worth it to pay the $4 billion. So he's getting in early before the media rights deal is done. A team like the Portland Trailblazers, they may wait until after the media rights deal is negotiated to sell the team and say, look, this is part of what you're going to inherit as an owner. We're jacking up the price because you're going to get all this media money. So it's interesting to watch the landscape of these teams. But, as we just showed you with the Big Ten, the NFL on Amazon, and MLS and MLB on Apple, the media rights continue to soar. Live sports on TV is the most valuable thing on TV because it's unpredictable. People are going to watch it live. They're going to stay glued to their TV. I mean, we'll talk about this later, but that World Cup final game, you weren't moving anywhere from your TV when there were PKs and there was extra time and, you were glued to your TV. You cannot find that with most any other type of programming that you're going to put on over the air TV. So that's why you see these media rights continue to soar.
Yeah, and I think the streaming is awesome because you could be in a plane and pay for the Wi-Fi and you're watching World Cup, from 35,000 feet in the air. I mean, it's just, there's stuff that when you and me grew up, that was nothing. It was 4 channels on the turn dial, and that was it. And now it's like, oh, just pick up your phone, your tablet, your iPad, whatever, and you can watch basically anything you're subscribed to. So, I mean, I think it's the death of local TV broadcast, but it's fun because you get it wherever you want.
Yeah. All right. Our 6th biggest story of 2022. USC and UCLA are heading to the Big Ten in 2024. And as I said, when this happened, which it happened earlier in the year, it was announced on June 30th. When I read this on Twitter, I was like, this has got to be a typo. Like UCLA and USC are on the Pacific Coast. They can't play in the Midwest footprint. This doesn't make any sense. What are we doing here? But sure enough, the regents have approved UCLA. USC is a private institution, and they, knew what they were doing all along. And those media rights that we just told you about with the Big Ten, the $7 billion, a big reason they were able to get $7 billion is they said, hey, look, we're bringing USC and UCLA with us. So this is literally a deal that's going to change the landscape of college sports. You're going to see games between USC and UCLA against Big Ten opponents played earlier. These are huge markets. I mean, they're both in LA, but they both have enormous fan bases. USC and UCLA, and we've had Matt Leinart on this year, and we've had, other people, Ryan Leaf, who played at Washington State. They've all talked about they want to play during the time when the most amount of people can watch. And when you play in the Pac-12 and you play on the West Coast, your games start at 10 p.m. Eastern. And even though Caleb Williams won the Heisman Trophy for USC, there's just not that much exposure for the athletes who are starting their games at 10 p.m. Eastern. So if you can go play in the Big Ten, you can get more NIL money. You can play in the prime part of the day when people are going to watch your games more, and you're going to be more of a household name, and you're going to raise your draft stock because more people are going to watch you. Of course you're going to do it. And USC and UCLA knew that the Pac-12 was on the decline and the Big Ten. And remember, we had Kevin Warren on last year, and who knew Kevin Warren was going to pull this rabbit out of his hat, the commissioner of the Big Ten. I mean, he's got to be up for Sports Business Executive of the Year for what he did with the Big Ten this year. But this was a huge story, Griggs. And again, 2024, we're going to see this. And oh, by the way, we're also going to see, Texas and is it Oklahoma move to the SEC in the not too distant future. So the college sports landscape, it is changing quickly.
Yeah, and I think, and we're seeing the playoff expanding too. So I mean, you're seeing how this whole thing is just revolving into a whole nother world. And I mean, like with USC and UCLA, Big Ten's great. I mean, look, they compete. You got Ohio State, you got Michigan, you got Penn State, you got even Purdue shows up. You got Indy. I mean, you're big teams that are always in the top 4 or 5 teams at the end of the season. So I think it's a great move for both those LA teams. And again, you got the huge LA market. There's obviously going to be some more travel expenses and
Oh my
admission
God.
fee.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to be traveling earlier in the week and all that too. But yeah, I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. We're going to see schools moving all over the place, and the Power Five could be changing to who knows what it ends up being. North and South or whatever they end up calling it, or North, South, East, West, whatever. But yeah, this is fun to watch. And again, amateur athletics, right? No money involved here, just billions and billions and billions.
Well, and we just saw recently, this isn't in our top 10, but eventually it will be, the expansion of the college football playoff, right? It's not going to be 4 teams anymore. It's going to expand beyond that. So how is that going to impact college football? Just a lot happening with the sports landscape. Mark Emmert is stepping down, the longtime president of the NCAA, a guest on this show. He's going to be replaced, I believe, in March. So, it continues to evolve. You wonder how long the NCAA is going to remain in existence. Are the conferences just going to govern themselves at some point? Again, if you're getting $7 billion for your media rights, you probably could govern yourself. I mean, you're bigger than the NCAA at that point. I would say absolutely the Big Ten is more powerful than the NCAA as an organization. So we'll watch that story closely. Our 5th biggest story of 2022, the emergence of the Live Golf Tour. This came on the scene in July, and Griggs, they took some big names from the PGA Tour. We told you earlier, $200 million for Phil Mickelson. Dustin Johnson, $125 million. By the way, how else do you get Dustin Johnson? You say, I'm going to give you $125 million just to play on our tour, but then we're going to give you incredible prize money, and we're going to give you, if you win the points at the end of the year, kind of like the FedEx Cup, you get an $18 million bonus. So Dustin Johnson this year brought in $125 million to sign with the Live Golf Tour. Then he brought in another $35 million in prize and bonus money from the Live Golf Tour. So when you start looking at career earnings of these golfers, you're paying Phil Mickelson, who's been around for a while, $200 million. That's more than he had earned in his entire career. You're paying Dustin Johnson more this year than he had earned in his entire career to this point. These guys have won majors. They won lots of golf tournaments. They're in the top 10 in prize money all time. And you're paying them in 1 year more than they've earned in their entire career. I'm not saying I agree with them signing. And as we told you earlier, Phil Mickelson lost all of his sponsors. Many of the golfers I'm about to name lost their sponsors as well. But Bryson DeChambeau went to the Live Golf Tour. Brooks Koepka went to the Golf Tour, the Live Golf Tour. Bubba Watson, who we've had on this show, went to the Live Golf Tour. And then, one of the real up-and-comers in golf, Cam Smith, went to the Live Golf Tour. So they took some big names, Greg Norman and the Live Golf Tour. They're flying them around in these fancy planes. They've got, benefits for the caddies and for the wives. And, they really have become the anti-PGA Tour, which has always been very traditional, but a little stuffy.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit like, the members at the golf club in Caddyshack. But it's really going to be interesting to see what happens with these 2 tours. And another piece of breaking news that just came down today is the Masters said in 2023, hey, the guys from the Live Tour, they can play in the Masters. So at least for now, this is a big victory for Phil Mickelson and Bryson DeChambeau and Dustin Johnson and Brooks Koepka and Bubba Watson. Because if the Masters had said anyone on the Live Golf Tour is forbidden from playing in the Masters, well, most of these guys, yes, they're playing for the money, but they're playing for the Grand Slams. That's where the legacy is. That's where the history is. And if you take that out of consideration for them and they can't play in the majors, and the Masters is one of the most premier majors, Now you're really putting a dent in the Live Tour. Well, that didn't happen. So it may happen eventually, but for 2023, Griggs, that might be one of the most entertaining. I mean, it's going to be like a WWE, you know, you got the black hats coming in and you got the good guys coming in, and it's Rory versus DJ, and it's Bryson DeChambeau versus Koepka, and it's, you know, Cam Smith versus whoever, Rory. It's going to be really interesting TV, because it's almost like it's going to be the PGA versus the Live Tour, and whoever wins that tournament is going to have that feather in their cap for their respective tour.
It's the Super Bowl of golf, big time
It
right now.
really is, yeah.
I mean, the Masters is always must-watch TV with just the PGA, and this is going to just bring the drama, and you can already hear the broadcasting and the stats, showing the Live stats for Phil and the PGA stats for Rory over here, and man, I think that is going to be cool. I'm glad that they're letting him in, because that's going to be fun to watch, and they'll, I'm sure, have a lot of drama building up for that one, and who's going to come, who's going to play. I'm looking forward to that.
And as traditional as the Masters is, look, they buy their own TV time. They want great ratings. They want eyeballs on that thing. They're not stupid. They know that you pit PGA versus Live, that's going to get a lot more attention than if you just said this is only limited to the PGA Tour. And all the guys, and most of the ones I mentioned, Phil Mickelson has won the Masters. Bubba Watson has won the Masters. Dustin Johnson has won the Masters. So these are past champions too. You got to let them in, and let's let them go at it. And I want to see some finger pointing and some smack talk and some uncomfortable groupings of two. And, you know, how great would it be on the last day, the final round, if the two leaders that tee off last, one is from the PGA Tour and one is from the Live Golf Tour? That is must-see TV. So, you know, golf could be boring unless Tiger's playing, or, you know, Rory's doing something special. But now I think there's some added drama to this thing. And, you know, the underlying part of this is, look at how, you know, we've talked about the sports washing that's going on, whether it's the Live Golf Tour, whether it's World Cup, or whether it's, you know, a Saudi team saying, hey, Ronaldo, we'll pay you $200 million a year to play for our team. The sports washing is going on. You know, the money is coming from bad sources. So that's definitely a part of the story. I don't want to dismiss that or discount that. But, you know, the Live Tour forming, anytime you have competition in business, it's going to make the incumbent have to work harder. And the PGA Tour had to change some rules this year. They had to go find more money for bonuses and for prize money. And it made them step up their game. And they've owned pro golf basically as a monopoly for many, many years. So if you like competition, if you like things changing, and you like drama, well, you know, here you go. You got the PGA versus the Live Golf Tour. We'll see how long Live is around. You know, I think it would be really interesting if in 5 years Live goes under. Would the PGA Tour welcome back Dustin Johnson, or a young Cam Smith, or a young Bryson DeChambeau, or are those guys like out for life and they're never welcome back, and they've got to go start another Live-like tour in order to play golf and make money? For the amounts of money that Live is paid out, it's almost like those golfers said, look, I'm going to ask for so much money here. I'm going to assume that if this goes under and I can't get back to the PGA Tour, I'm set for the rest of my life, because sponsors won't touch me. The PGA Tour may not take me back. Like, I got to make sure that I'm covered for generations to come.
Yeah, and I think something to look, you know, in 2023 to watch with this Live Tour too is, and we've talked about before when we talked about this, is, you know, streaming. Do they get a streaming platform? Do they get some kind of a TV deal? Because you can't really watch it much now. It's mainly on Twitter highlights and random video clips here and there. So I think that's big. And obviously, to keep them going and making money, they're going to have to start getting viewers easier than they have right now. So that'll be something to watch.
And they can wear shorts. So that's another thing. Phil is really enjoying showing off his calves. Right. And wearing shorts. So again, they're kind of the anti-traditionalists.
Yeah.
They don't have the history that the PGA Tour has, but it was interesting to watch. It's like the car accident you can't turn away from.
Right.
So, all right. Our fourth biggest sports business story of 2022. Two GOATs retire, both of them from the tennis world. Roger Federer, the owner of 20 Grand Slam titles, $1.1 billion in career earnings from prize money, endorsements, and appearance fees. He retired late in the year, played his last tournament or last competitive tennis at the Laver Cup in London, actually right after I had left. I wish I could have stayed and seen that. It was really great to see how things ended, and a lot of pomp and circumstance and tears, and holding hands with Rafael Nadal, his longtime rival. That was amazing to watch. And then Serena Williams, when she went out at the US Open, that was the end for her, although she kind of cracked the door open afterwards. But she earned $450 million in her career with prize money, endorsements, and appearance fees. She won 23 Grand Slams. So, when you're talking about the GOATs of tennis, I know people will mention others, Martina and Chris Evert on the women's side. People will mention, obviously, Nadal and others on the men's side. But for my money, and I'm fortunate enough that I got to see both Federer and Serena play in person during my lifetime. Wow. I mean, you can't get much better than what they did. And I just told you the money they earned. And they were such the faces of tennis for pretty much 2 decades. It was really neat to see what they did over the course of their career. And you have to tip your cap to them at the end of their career for the longevity that they had and playing at the highest levels for as long as they did.
Well, I mean, and Serena, I mean, what she did for women's tennis it's unfathomable. I mean, the girls that are playing now and the women that are coming up now, and it's incredible. It's just and I think Serena has encouraged and influenced so many women to play tennis, and we see it on the court. There's some amazing women's tennis players out there, and when they are interviewed, a lot of them give credit to Serena, getting them on the court. So, I mean, you talk about Bill Russell, 11 champs in 13 years, 20 Grand Slams for Federer in 23. It's unbelievable. I mean, that is so many wins, and I'm so jealous you got to see both of them live, because on TV they're just dominating. They go out there and it's just like you just know they're going to win when they go out and play. It's just phenomenal to watch those two.
Well, and Serena's got to be not even in the conversation, like a surefire lock for greatest woman athlete of all time. Any sport, not just tennis, any sport. You put her up against the greatest in any other sport on the women's side. Like you said, what she meant to tennis. If you've seen the movie King Richard, which won some awards, you see her backstory and, the streets of Compton with her sister Venus. And, she had a lot against her to even get out of that neighborhood and play pro tennis, much less become the GOAT. So 2 GOATs right off into the sunset. I'm sure, the good thing about tennis is they can play exhibitions, they can play charity events, they can do commentating. Both are very tied into the business world and own businesses themselves and have lots invested in business and sport. So sure, this isn't the last we've heard of them, but as far as playing competitive tennis and competing for Grand Slams, and again, just like we talked about with the golfers, for Serena and Federer, like that's what it was about for them, is history. They wanted to win Grand Slams. They didn't care as much about winning, a regular season tournament. They wanted to win Wimbledon and the Australian and the French and the US. That was what they knew would, be on their resume. Joker and Nadal have more Grand Slams than Federer, but I'll take Federer. I mean, I love Nadal and I love Joker, but Federer was so graceful, and there was literally no shot that he couldn't hit on a tennis court. He had everything in his bag. And again, getting to see him, he just like floated across the court like a ballerina. And he always hit the ball right in the center of the racket on the strings, like never, mishit a shot. And, Serena just had power and, could kill you with a serve. And, intimidated you. I thought she was a lot like Mike Tyson. You walked onto the court against Serena and you were like, how many games am I going to be able to? And I hope I don't lose 6-0, 6-0, right? Like, I just want to win some games. And it wasn't as much the case at the end of her career when she slowed down. And my God, after she had a child, like, her body changed. But when you walked onto the court against Serena, you were just hoping to survive and not get embarrassed, much less, beat her and win.
Yeah, and I think one thing tennis does really well too is with the bringing these stars back to commentate. I mean, you see it on all the matches, whether it's Chris Evert or, any of these guys. And I love that because I think both these would be so fascinating to listen to watching these matches. So I hope they maybe sign a little deal here and there with NBC or whoever's doing tennis. But I think, man, both of them intimidating in different ways. I love Roger Federer too, like just the most even keel. Like he didn't get mad. He didn't get screamy or yelly. He just went out there and hit the ball and knew how to hit it. And they're just, it's good. They'll be missed on the court because they were both fun to watch.
All right. So if there's any executive from ESPN listening to this right now, I have an idea. I would like to propose a Manning cast type of broadcast with Roger Federer and Serena Williams during the Grand Slams that you televise. Get it done. I want to see Roger. I want to see Serena. I want to see them commentating during the Grand Slams on a Manning cast. Let them bring on some guests. Think of the guests that they could bring on. Who wouldn't want to sit down with two GOATs? Let's get it done. I know you're going to have to pay some money. It's not my money. I don't have to put up the money, but I would like to see that. So ESPN or some big network, please get it done.
Good idea. I'm down with that. I would totally watch that one.
All right. Our third biggest story of the year 2022, the crash of crypto and the impact on the sports world. There were athlete deals gone bad, naming rights deals that went bad. I'm not going to recap all of this because we went into this in depth on our November 15th edition of Sports Business Radio and what it meant to Tom Brady getting sued and Steph Curry getting sued and FTX getting sued and having 17 of the 19 years left on the naming rights deal on the Miami Heat arena. The Lakers and the Clippers play in the crypto.com arena. How long is it until that deal goes bad? This was the gold rush of, athlete deals, naming rights deals, and it looked all so great. And then it crashed. And now everyone's getting sued. And like I said, I'm not going to go into it in detail because on the November 15th show we did. So go back and listen to that. But Griggs, this was a huge story. And it's just the beginning. There's going to be lawsuits. There's going to be, athletes who said, hey, pay me in crypto instead of in money, like dollars. And, they're going to have lost money. We haven't heard the end of this, and it's going to have an impact for a while.
Yeah, I think it's just a big story. And I think we talked about vetting owners, when an owner is buying a team, it's like this kind of deal. This thing comes out and they sign all these big names, but we have no history. We have no proof that this is going to be around for 5, 10, 20, 30 years. And sure enough, here it goes a year or two into it when it's like all this new stuff, it's gone. And then, their big mistake that they now know is signing these huge names. Tom Brady and Steph and all these guys in arenas. It's not something you can just, push under the rug and it's gone in a day. No, it's going to be around for a while.
Yeah. All right. The second biggest sports business story of 2022. Anytime we have major events, they tend to be at the top of our list. The Winter Olympics in China. They were held in Beijing from February 4th to the 20th. It's the first time a city has hosted both the Summer and Winter Olympic Games. It went off pretty smoothly. If you remember, because of the pandemic and because it's in China and it's a communist country and, there were a lot of concerns going in, but all things considered, there were no major incidents during those Olympics, Griggs. And, they got good ratings on NBC and people tuned in and, there were athletes who benefited from doing well in the Olympics. I still just wonder about the long-term viability of the Olympics in general, because there's so much money that has been put into these venues and to the infrastructure of the city. And then in many cases, they leave and it becomes a ghost town. And you look at Sochi in Russia, you look at, Athens in Greece, you look at some of these places, Google the pictures now. They're ghost towns. And, they sold their soul in order to host the Olympics. So it is at least good to see that Beijing has now hosted winter and summer. They could reuse some of the facilities, and there's some sustainability there. I think we're going to see that with LA in 2028 as well. Some of those facilities are going to be used again, and some of them are being built for other purposes to begin with, and they'll just happen to be used by the Olympics as well. But I don't know. What were your thoughts on the Olympics?
Yeah, I thought once again, NBC shows well. They do a good job with it. It always looks good. Had some more streaming this time, which was kind of fun to be able to watch it on your phone or whatever. But yeah, overall, I think it's good. And I think you bring up a good point too, that a lot of these with the Olympics, especially when they look at these cities that are going to host it, maybe it should be more of these cities that have the infrastructure already built, and they have the city, and they have the support system around the city. Because man, those ghost town pictures are so sad when you see these countries that host it and spend all this money, and then it just goes to ghost town and crap, and that's sad to see. And you hear stories too about some of these Olympic villages and how dirty they are and how messy they are, and there's always backstories to everything. But you and I both love the Olympic Games. It's fun to watch. It's always must watch TV because it's drama. There's always something going on. There's big stories. There's an injury here, or something here, or whatever happens. There's political infrastructure and things going on with it too. So it's always must watch TV. And I am looking forward to having them, in LA, and see how the old US can handle them. So we'll see what happens.
All right. Our top story of the year 2022. And we went into great depth about this story on our November 28th show with Andy Peterson from the Associated Press, but it was the FIFA World Cup. Griggs, we told our audience that this was by far the most expensive World Cup ever hosted, $220 billion. Like literally $150 billion more than any other country had spent to host it's almost like they built a whole new country for the World Cup, and a whole new city and all new venues, and so many political undertones to the World Cup. And again, we cover those on our November 28th show. Since that show, I mean, Grant Wall, the longtime soccer writer, died while covering the World Cup. Some people suspected foul play. The autopsy was done. It showed otherwise. But, in that kind of a country, you got to at least raise an eyebrow and go, huh. He was saying some things that made the locals and the government a little bit upset. But at the end of the day, what I think it will be remembered for the most is the most epic of finals. It was Argentina. It was France. It was the two best teams. By far, those were the two best teams. Two of the best players in the world just went at it. It was Mbappe. It was Messi. I tweeted out, this was the closest thing I've seen to Bird versus Magic.
Yeah.
When I was a kid and you watched the Lakers and Celtics in the finals, it was like, who's going to have the ball last? That's who's going to win. Because Bird and Magic, they're going to come up clutch every single time. Like, they just go at it. And Messi and Mbappe has a hat trick. Messi has 2 goals and an assist. They both played their best on the biggest of stages. The emotion, I mean, you hear about people from Argentina that, sold their homes and cashed in on their life savings in order to go to Qatar and watch Argentina win the World Cup. And they did. And you see just the streets of Buenos Aires flooded with the parade to celebrate Argentina winning the World Cup. And it means so much to these people and so much to these countries that win or, compete for winning like France did. But it was quite a showdown. Rarely do sporting events live up to the hype. Most of the time it's like, oh, that Super Bowl was a blowout, or, that boxing match didn't turn out to be what we thought it would be, or that final pairing at the Masters really landed with a thud. Mbappe versus Messi and France versus Argentina, it lived up to the hype.
Big time. And I mean, it started, Argentina got those two earlier goals, and you're like, oh, come on, France got to come back here, right? And then a minute and 33 seconds, and Mbappe knocks it two, and it's like, okay, now match on. Here we go.
Yeah.
And it was just, I couldn't turn away. I had to keep watching. We were texting during it too. It's just like, everybody needs to be watching this match because it is that good. And I don't know if we've got ratings back yet because I think they were up against NFL, but I mean, that you talk about what sport is the world sport. It is definitely football or soccer, because those parades, I mean, Argentina was just unreal how many people were in the
Yeah.
city. And Messi got off the plane and holds up the trophy and everybody's just going nuts. I mean, it's so cool, the passion that these fans have for their national team. And man, that was just phenomenal. I mean, World Cup always is. I mean, that's about the only sport I'll get up for, 3 a.m. to watch a Morocco versus whoever, just
Right.
because it's World Cup. You never know what's going to happen, and it's fun. So I love it.
Yeah. 16.7 million people watched the final between Argentina and France, according to Fox Sports, the most watched soccer match ever in the history of the United States. So, and again, if you put this into NFL numbers, that's like a mediocre NFL weekend. That's a bad game on Amazon on a Thursday night. The Super Bowl is getting 100+ million viewers, but in the US, this isn't globally, because globally, the number probably does approach 100 million at least, maybe more than that. But in the US, 16.7 million people tuned in to watch Argentina and France on Fox. And, it lived up to the hype, like I said. I don't think Qatar should ever host another major event. They want to host the Olympics in the future, as we detail on our November 28th show. That should not happen. And we tell you why in that November 28th show. But Griggs, that's our top story. FIFA World Cup in Qatar. It wasn't just about the soccer. It was about the politics. It was about basically constructing a whole new city, spending $220 billion, all the TV and the streaming and, everything that went into this huge undertaking. And, the eyeballs from all over the world being focused on this thing. I felt like that was a much bigger event than the Winter Olympics in China. I didn't hear the buzz around the Winter Olympics in China that I heard around World Cup. And, the viewership numbers, basically backed me up there.
Yeah. And, looking forward to 2023, you got the Women's World Cup coming up in July and August. That's going to be fun. That's just as awesome. I mean, I love it. USA's favored probably in that one, but it's fun. And then in 2026, we got World Cup in the US and 3 nations, kind of the USA, Mexico, and Canada. That'll be interesting to see. 16 venues for the 2026 World Cup. That'll be fun to see.
Yeah, it will be fun to see. It'll be interesting to see what changes in the world between now and then. Again, if you had asked us on our year-end show a couple of years ago, hey, is there a pandemic coming? We didn't even know what a pandemic was.
Right.
And it came. So you really do have to plan for scenario A, B, C, D, E, F, and G now.
Yeah.
If you're one of these major events, what happens if you can't play in front of fans? What happens if, you have to just stream it, or there's all these different scenarios that you have to look at now. And, it'll be interesting to see with these, major events, and then, just all the sports leagues and everything coming up. Some other things that stood out in my mind that weren't on the list this year, just the transformation of the NWSL, right? It went through a lot this year. We had Jessica Berman, the commissioner of the league, on this year. I would invite you to listen to that interview. I think she's a good leader. The league is in good hands. They've started this, board of advisors of current and former players, which I think is really smart. But the growth of women's sports, the WNBA and the NWSL, there's more money being invested into these teams and leagues. Sponsors are really starting to get behind it. Franchise values are increasing. If you see what's happening in Angel City FC, we had Abby Wambach on. She's part owner of that team a year ago. And, it's all trending in the right direction. And as I've said, when people have interviewed me this year, I've said, if you're looking to invest in something, I think women's sports has the most upside right now. So, I still stand behind that. Carly Lloyd was on this year on the show, longtime U.S. women's national team member. She had some great things to say about the current and hopefully future state of women's sports. So just some great guests. I mean, I feel like this year, we had some really good guests on the show, and I thank everyone for sitting down with us and talking with us and sharing their insight. And, it's just remarkable. When we started this show in 2004, a lot of the athletes we had on, they would come on and talk about, oh, I have an endorsement deal with Nike, or I've got an endorsement deal with McDonald's. Or now you have athletes like Malcolm Jenkins on, and Carly Lloyd, and Sue Bird, and Abby Wambach, and they're the CEO of their own portfolio. Like, they are, owning restaurants. They are starting sports and apparel companies. They're investors in teams and leagues. Like, they are, mini moguls, and they took what they learned while they were playing, and they built relationships while they were playing, and they've parlayed it into being, mini moguls when they are done. And they're invested in so many different things. They have diverse portfolios. They're providing jobs for many. They're really smart, so the day of, the athlete who went broke or didn't invest their money wisely, or, only gets paid by an endorser and they're not an investor, those are over. Like, these are some really smart, savvy athletes that we have on. We've had some great coaches on. I always love when we get the ownership perspective or the president perspective, leaders of organizations like the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Golden State Warriors, who, as I've said, in the last 10 years, I'll put their success up against anyone in their respective leagues, the NHL and the NBA. So, I feel like I've said this since 2004, we all get smarter, including us, when we listen to the people who join us on Sports Business Radio. It is like a master class, and listening to them share their wisdom of, what they've learned, how they've created championship organizations and cultures and sustained it for long amounts of time, like the Warriors and the Lightning. And, I have been doing this now for 19 years. You've been with me for most of that journey. I'm not even close to bored.
No.
I am still curious. I still want to talk to a lot of people. So unfortunately, Sports Business Radio listeners, even though I probably had the toughest, worst year of my life personally, and, I won't go into that now, but I might in the future on another platform. I still get excited about doing the show each week and interviewing our guests and interacting with our audience on our social media platforms. And obviously, Griggs, being here with you every week. So I hope we're doing this for a long time. We're coming up on 20 years in 2024. So, we want to do a big blowout for that. But, it was a fun ride this year in the realm of Sports Business Radio.
Well, and I think, like you mentioned too, it's so much more than just, like in our name, sports business. Well, yeah, it's more than just sports, because there's so much behind the scenes, and the stuff you can learn that we've learned from these guests this year about their brand and about what they've done off the court or off the field. It's fascinating because, their window of sport is 10 years, 5 years, 15 years. And then they've got, hopefully 50, 60 years of living life after that. And that's where, becoming their own brand and investing with these people and what they say on and off the field and court, it's fascinating. So yeah, I think I learned so much more this year, I think, than any year. I feel like we really just dug into some great conversations about, life with these people and what they do off the court. So yeah, fascinating stuff. And I love doing it. And I don't get bored either. It's always fun.
Yeah. I want to thank our sponsors who, without them, this show wouldn't be possible. Roan, the official menswear partner of Sports Business Radio, just love their stuff. Love Nate Chacketts and his team and what they're doing there, not only with their clothing, but, in the realm of mental health. So many other initiatives that they have going on. Boingo is our longtime partner of the Sports Business Radio Roadshow. It was great to see their CEO, Mike Fenley, at our event in San Francisco with the Warriors last week. Underdog Fantasy, we have so much fun competing against each other. Griggs, I kicked your rear in Best Ball Mania 3. So that was fun. And, it just makes the game so much more interesting to watch when We've got some competition going. And Inside Tracker. I mean, we're all trying to be healthier, and they're about as good as it gets when it comes to, really giving us data and analytics about our health. So, our sponsors are wonderful. We thank them. I'd be remiss to not thank CG Sports, who powers sports business radio. CG Young, Matt and Marilyn. We've got Nicole, who helps us with all of our graphics. Look at these cool backgrounds that we have. Thanks, Nicole. Calvin does our YouTube videos and our social media clips. So we've got a really good team. I'm excited about what 2023 holds. I really do think it might be our best year ever at the end of the day. We've got some exciting things planned that we can tell you more about in the new year. But, it's not just us two knuckleheads that are making this operation go. We've got the help of CG Sports. We've got the help of our sponsors, and our listeners. I love hearing from people around the world. That's the thing that's cool about this show is, since it's a podcast, anyone around the world can listen. You can listen on your own time, on demand. There's no barriers or boundaries. We could have someone in Qatar reach out. We could have someone in Russia reach out. I've had people in Australia reach out. Obviously, we hear from people here in the States. It was so much fun for me to go to Europe and to do a couple shows from London and dive in to the business of, English soccer. And, if you haven't listened to those shows, those are really insightful and informative. We heard from someone, a GM who builds a team and is in charge of a roster. We heard from an owner. There's a lot of differences between American soccer and English soccer. And it was fascinating for me to get to see it. And people had been saying for years, hey, Berger, go over to Europe and compare and contrast. So we finally got to do that. And it was an interesting time to be over there. The Queen died the day I landed. Totally unexpected. So, I was there during a historic time. But yeah, Griggs, it's been an interesting year. Thank you for all your great work and everything that you do. And, I love when we go out like to the road shows and stuff, and people, it's like, hey, there's Griggs. Like, you're certainly a character on this show as well, and synonymous with sports business radio. And, me, for good or for bad, I hold people to high standards.
Sure.
And you meet those standards week after week. So I appreciate it.
And I appreciate that. And I thank you for the opportunity, and the traveling is always fun. It's so fun to be back out traveling finally and seeing people and meeting our sponsors and hanging out. And man, just that personal touch, is so huge, and just being together with people. So yeah, it's fun. It's been a great year. I'm looking forward to 2023, and just, the fun of talking to people and learning more. And the masterclass continues, right?
Is there anything in 2023 that you're either looking forward to and or predict?
Well, I mentioned it earlier. I love the Women's World Cup. Is so fun, and the USA team is just must-watch TV. And some of those women are just iconic athletes. So I'm really looking forward to that. That's late July into August, so that will be on my phone or tablet or however I'm watching it. Looking forward to that. I think USA is going to do good and should probably hopefully win it. But I think, we always talk about NBA Finals and Super Bowl. Those are two big ones to watch. I kind of think, can the Eagles keep it going? I don't know. If Jalen Hurts is unhealthy, I don't know if they can keep on winning, but I think Eagles and KC might be a fun Super Bowl if that works out. And then let's get the Nuggets into the NBA Finals. It's been a while.
Wow.
Yeah, let's get the Bucks versus Nuggets. I'm calling that for the NBA Finals. So we'll see if the Greek freak and Jokic can get at it and bump some bodies down there in the bottom, the under the hoop. So that'll be fun to watch. Those are my ones for this year.
All right. Those are all very good. We talked earlier in the show about the NBA media rights deal coming up. I think it's going to be record breaking. I think it's going to be mind boggling. There's been a lot of talk about Turner re-signing, the NBA on TNT studio crew to 10-year deals. I think Turner's going to step up with big money, despite all the back and forth and the jockeying. I won't be surprised if there's a considerable streaming element to an NBA deal. So will you be able to watch NBA games somewhere other than, just on ESPN or Turner. The NFL media rights, DirecTV has been the longtime home of the Sunday Ticket. Where is that going to go? Is it going to be Apple? Is it going to be Amazon? Is it going to be, somewhere else? That's going to be something to really keep an eye on, because it's been with DirecTV for many, many years. So that's going to change how we watch NFL on Sunday. I think the Milwaukee Bucks are going to win the NBA championship. I think the Greek Freak, like you said, is going to be back. I think they have Chris Middleton back. We had Mark Lazary on in the last year, the governor of the Bucks, and they have a really bright, smart front office. And if I was starting an NBA team, I love Luka, I love Zion, but I'm taking Giannis every time. I mean, that guy just plays hard on every single play, and I think he's the best player in the NBA. I think Tom Brady is going to wind up with the San Francisco 49ers. I think he's going to go home for his final season. He wants to be near his parents. He's now divorced. I think he wants to end it where it all began. And, I'm not sure the Niners think Trey Lance is ready. Garoppolo is out for the year. The quarterback who is Mr. Irrelevant that's playing for them now, Brock Purdy, great story, but I think they're going to see if we can get Tom Brady for his final season in San Francisco. So I think, that's something on my radar as well. I said earlier in the year, if I was betting on one woman athlete for the next 10 years, I'm betting on Sophia Smith of the NWSL and the Portland Thorns and the U.S. women's national team. I think she is a star in the making. I think she could be the next Alex Morgan, Mia Hamm, whatever, iconic women's player that you want to put her next to, Abby Wambach. But Sophia Smith, I'm buying all of her stock for the next 10 years. And I think if there's companies out there that are smart, they're going to get in on her early. And then, gosh, I had another one and I can't remember what it was. But those are some of my...
That covers some good ones.
Yeah, those are some of my predictions. Major League Baseball, they're spending a lot of money on these players. And, like we said, we're seeing 10, 11, 12, 13-year deals. I just don't feel good about those. I think, when you get into year 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 of those deals, you're going to start having buyer's remorse.
Yeah.
I love Dansby Swanson going to the Cubs. That was a good deal. It was 7 years and he's a young player, but you're not giving him 13 years or 10 years or these long-term contracts that we're seeing. It's great for the player if you're an injury-prone player. Like, again, if I'm Anthony Davis, I'm signing a 10-year deal because I get hurt every other game.
Right.
But if I'm Aaron Judge, I'm not signing a 10-year deal. I'm signing a 5-year deal and I'm hitting the market. And, LeBron has done that masterfully during his career. He's signed, 1 and 2 year deals and has tested the market after those years. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Lakers. I think they could blow that whole thing up. I think, Anthony Davis, he showed he's got some, great basketball in him with the 50-point games and stuff, but he also, like I just said, gets hurt all the time. LeBron is getting older. Do the Lakers blow it up and start over and try and get some assets from those two players? I won't be surprised at the February trade deadline if they're out of it, if they blow it up and start over again. And, there's nothing that sells better in sports, especially in the NBA, than hope, right? Look at the Oklahoma City Thunder. We've got a good young core and we have like 18 draft picks in the next 4 years. Yeah, you can sell hope and people will buy it. I think the Lakers might be better off selling hope and rebooting and getting rid of Anthony Davis and LeBron James before they don't have any market value or have a lot less market value than hanging on to them. And, we got into the play-in. Big deal. What is that going to get you? I do think the Lakers really want LeBron to break the all-time scoring record, Kareem's record, in a Lakers uniform. But if that happens and it happens before the February trade deadline, I think you could see LeBron and Anthony Davis in play on a, we're going to blow it up scenario in Laker land. The Clippers have a new arena that it's going to be coming on board. So here's an interesting stat. Here's some inside. An insider told me this. How about this? So a typical arena from top to bottom has anywhere between, 400 and 500 bathrooms, depending on how carried away you want to get. I was told by a source that the new Clippers arena is going to have over 1,100 bathrooms in the new Clippers arena. And it's because Steve Ballmer doesn't want his fans missing any of the action. So what happens is you got to go to the bathroom, you miss a quarter.
Yeah.
You decide you want to get something to eat. You miss 2 quarters. He wants people to be able to go to the bathroom quickly and get back to their seat.
I like it.
So I was told that this new arena for the Clippers is going to have more bathrooms in it than any arena in the world because they don't want people to miss the action. I think it's great. And if you're, Steve Ballmer and you've got $100 billion and money's no object, why not?
Why not? No, I love it. I think it's great. Yeah. I mean,
put lots of bathrooms in.
Or make the experience more easy for the fan, and we talk about that too with the different things with food, mobile app, and where it comes to your seat. We're seeing more of that because you don't want people, they're paying a lot of money for these games. You don't want them to have to get up and miss half the game, wander around the concourse, getting food and going to the bathroom. So, hey, I love it.
Yeah. I guess one other thing, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, is I do think the Washington Commanders are going to go for $5 billion. So I think they're going to be, the most expensive franchise sold in North America. The Broncos have that record now, $4.65 billion. I think the Commanders will get 5 because they're, in Washington, D.C. Even though there's a lot of controversy around the organization, I would expect a new owner to come in and clean house and reset the organization. I do think Ron Rivera's done a great job there. I mean, there's a lot of noise there, and he's helped his players play through the noise and has done a pretty good job. So maybe they keep Ron Rivera, but that's going to be an interesting story to watch too. So Griggs, those are some of the things on the radar for 2023. It's been a great year for Sports Business Radio. Not a good year for me personally, but we'll keep plugging along and hopefully the future improves. And again, thank you to you. Thank you to CG Sports. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to our listeners. I hope everyone has a happy holiday season. I hope everyone's safe. And we look forward to, interacting with everyone in 2023.